Hello and welcome to the Partners Guide magazine show. The Partners Guide is a magazine specializing on business and economics issues both within and affecting Zambia. We're here today at the Pangea Investment Conference, which is a Zambian investment conference promoting non-traditional sectors. Our guest here today is Derek Watts, the man behind Carte Blanche, the informative, entertaining and often controversial TV show based in South Africa. So Derek, firstly, how does it feel to be on the receiving end of the questions?
Ray, it's very different. And I sometimes feel uncomfortable because I find it much easier to ask the questions.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about Carte Blanche, because it's been going for some time now. What were the circumstances under which you founded and started off Carte Blanche?
Well, Mnet had only been going for 2 years. And they wanted a program which was more of a light entertainment program. They hired Bill Fora, who was famous for Shaka Zulu and for Miss World contests, to put it together. And let's be honest, the first Carte Blanche was really just a variety show. We had Bond actresses, we had a very vivacious swimmer, we had a DJ at the time, Cocky Tubal. And it certainly had no hint of being an investigative program that would last for more than a quarter of a century. Big thing is we started with 60 Minutes. Now 60 Minutes are legendary. 60 Minutes America and Australia. Now if you can imagine, we're starting off our program and now we can pick the best from CBS 60 Minutes, the world leaders, from both countries, and we were up against them, and people looked at our little segments on swimmers and actresses and said, but you know, you're not like Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes, who was a legend in his time. So we had to lift our game. We had to produce programs at, I reckon, probably 1,000th of the budget, and we had to work hard to do that, but we used their principles, Ray, and that was not just giving the facts, it was personalizing stories, personalizing world events. So somebody watching really felt that they were being drawn into the story. And that has been, I think, the secret of Carte Blanche, and that it's not just a bland analysis of the facts or this happened, it's the personal stories.
Okay, great. I mean, many observers would say that you were very young when you started off Carte Blanche. Would you have any advice for young people getting into business or even into business in the media?
It's quite a difficult question these days because a lot of young people say to me, look, I want to be a journalist. What can you tell me? And I say to them, but you are a journalist. And they look at me sort of in wonderment. And I say, but you've got a phone. You've got a smartphone. Yes. I say, well, you can tweet, you can Snapchat. You are broadcasting to people, so you are a journalist. And it's becoming more complicated now to, first of all, get involved in a space where you are legitimate, that you are broadcasting in a way to thousands of people. And of course, the difficult part is to make money from it. And you've got that transition now, especially with print. You know, a lot of print organizations are seeing dwindling circulations because the media is there. The media is on my phone here. I mean, if I wake up in the morning, I can go onto Twitter and the people I follow, and there's my news. So it's so immediate. And I find it's difficult for people to decide what part of this huge journalistic amphitheater are they going to be part of. And that is the decision they've got to make, which isn't easy. And I think you have to be far more a specialist in what you want to do, and you have to really decide what part of the media you want to be involved in.
There's a few interesting points that you raised there. I mean, obviously, with all of this access to technology and media now, almost anyone can be a journalist. Now, firstly, how can somebody get from the level of being a social journalist, using social media, Twitter, Facebook, blogging, to get themselves up to the level of a Carte Blanche, for example?
Well, first of all, let's look at the traditional media that still is out there, and that, of course, is the electronic media, television, radio. The opportunities are there. I mean, when I started out in South Africa, it was basically just the national broadcaster. and I was actually the sports reporter for TV News. And basically that was the one job in the country, so I was hugely privileged to go to every sporting event and be embraced, because I was the only person that could be there. You look at it now, I mean, DSTV, for example, has got just so many channels. There are so many different programs to get involved in. And I think that is, firstly, as I was saying, the challenge is to decide where you want to contribute, where your passions lie. And I think this is so much passion-driven that you first of all have to decide what part of that media, the electronic media, you want to be a part of. If you try and start off with social media, becoming a blogger, I don't think I'd be an expert to tell you how to do it. But I think, again, you have to have an overall passion for what you're doing. And I've seen that all the way through. And I mean, passion's such an overworked term, but if you're not really trying to get a message out, you're going to get lost there, because it is overwhelming. I mean, you know yourself, just the many platforms in social media. How do you attract an audience? How do you gain more followers? You have to be able to market yourself, but also you have to be relevant. You've got to be interesting. And you have to be novel. You've got to find something that nobody else is doing.
Okay, there's some excellent points there. Whilst the easy access to technology, it's creating a lot of opportunities for people to get their message out there. By the same token, that also causes a lot of challenges, because there's so many messages out there. Number one, what message do you follow? Number two, what message do you believe? And thirdly, how is it possible to regulate that?
You've hit the nail on the head there, Ray. I mean, when you look at news media around the world, just look at it. Look at CNN, look at Sky. Look at how many reports they're getting from Twitter and from other cell phone reports, cell phone footage. So what you're talking about really is filtering information. And of course, for any news organization, that has become vital. Just making sure that it is valid, making sure that it is in proportion to what is happening. And those are the challenges we've got. And again, it's down to marketing, it's down to integrity to a large extent, because there's so many stories floating around these days where one organization will grab it or even pay for it. Others will be more discerning and say, no, we don't believe that that's really depicts the situation. We're certainly not willing to pay for it. And there's this word sensation. Now, you look at it. There's such a fine line between sensation, between entertainment, and this broad body of information called news. And I think that is what is so interesting these days, because you've got to walk this tightrope of informing in a structured, responsible way, and yet attracting viewers. And that is such a challenge, because you can go overboard in being flashy and getting the viewers, but you haven't got the substance. We like to think on Carte Blanche that we have got that formula right. We're not perfect, we make mistakes, but I think that we've got quite a fine balance there between entertaining people and giving them the information, which is this word called infotainment.
Okay. I mean, it's been a hot topic in Zambia over the last couple of years with the mushrooming of a number of online news websites. And it seems to be the trend that for these news sites to get more followers, they have to come up with more sensational stories, more controversial stories, more salacious stories. And the government, saying we want to crack down on this. But clearly there is a space for relevant and online news sites that are well-sourced and balanced, but how can we promote this, and how can we also regulate this in Zambia, where it seems to be the trend that one online news outlet is trying to outdo the other one with more and more controversial stories?
Yeah, regulation is such a difficult enterprise, really, isn't it? I mean, if you look at China, I mean, there they are supplying more than half of the world's goods, and you still can't Google Tiananmen Square there. So there's not a direct link between a free press, a free media, and commerce and industry. You can, as a country, I might say unfortunately, be very successful and not allow much freedom of speech, as we see in many countries. But I think more and more the social media, if you call it that, is winning this war. I think more and more free expression is reigning. And you've got a young population that are so determined to get their points across that they are willing to sacrifice to a large extent, as we're seeing in many conflict zones around the world. And of course, we saw it in Egypt. I don't say it's a good thing, but it's become so powerful, hasn't it, that you can try and clamp down. But in the end, you've got to ban cell phones, you've got to ban smartphones, you've got to ban all forms, basically, of IT, because otherwise it's a war that I think countries are going to lose in the end. And I think the real point is that at some stage you have to face up to the world.
Okay.
The media.
Now, a lot of viewers here in Zambia that have commented on your program, Carte Blanche. The main reason that I'm often getting why they're an avid follower of Carte Blanche is that you often seem to be able to ask difficult questions to what would be known in Zambia as difficult people to ask those questions to. So how do you think you've managed to build up your brand, Carte Blanche, and working within the South African media to be able to ask those tough questions to people that people in Zambia would say, no, you can't ask people the questions like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ray. I mean, I think to some extent you've got to build up a platform of integrity and respect, and I think that's what Carte Blanche has done. So people feel that they will get a fair hearing at least, that it won't be edited in a way that's out of context. But it is a problem, but you know, Carte Blanche is in a unique situation. I mean, we started in 1988 when the government was outgoing. The apartheid government was clawing on to the last vestiges of their rule. So they weren't really interested at that stage on clamping down on Carte Blanche. Especially was on a new platform, Mnet. Mnet have been extremely brave in broadcasting Carte Blanche over the years, sometimes even when it's brought some of their advertisers into conflict. But the point is, we had the apartheid government that thought, let this run, I hate to say it, but we're on our last legs. Then you had the incoming government, which certainly, of course, with Madiba especially, setting the way, the path ahead, it wasn't going to clamp down suddenly on the media. And over the years, I suppose, progressive governments progressive presidents really, have not really effectively clamped down on the media, and Carte Blanche in particular. Of course, there are hints that that wonderful freedom is being curtailed in some respects, but I think Carte Blanche is a particular program that's had, I think, a great. I think timing is the word. I mean, we came in at the right time, and we've been there for 26 years. Can you translate that into other countries around Africa? It is difficult. I think that, as we were saying, with social media and expression being, free expression of individuals being stronger and stronger, I think some governments are realizing that you have to actually face up to it at some stage. And I think this example of inviting me to the Zambia Investment Conference is just another example of a brave step. I mean, they invited me here, they invited me to interview the finance minister. Not many African countries would do that. I've just been impressed by what Zambia has done over the years. It's a very stable economy. But over the years, Zambia has set a good example, I think, to the rest of Africa. And if you look at many countries that have been doing very well, like Kenya and Nigeria, it's tragic that they are now having to deal with acts of terror, tragic incidents of human lives being lost, abductions. So, I mean, around Africa there are challenges, but wow, there are challenges around the world right now, aren't there?
Absolutely. I'd like to bring you back to the same interview with the finance minister, actually. How did you find that in terms of, the questions you felt you were able to ask and the responses that you were getting?
I felt I was able to ask anything I liked. I think the minister was very gracious in his replies. I didn't want to interrupt and be as sort of forceful as I would be, say, in South Africa, but it's all part of a process, isn't it? And once we get this whole system evolving here of, okay, it's not so bad to talk to the media. And I know the minister himself, to be honest, was very scathing about the world media, but with some good reason, because we know that around the world, Africa is Africa. And even one of the delegates here was talking about, she was too scared to go to Cape Town. And I said, but why? I've never seen Cape Town in that light. But obviously, to a large extent, people don't differentiate. And I think that is the benefit of a country like Zambia coming to light, bringing more of the local and international media into their plans and their problems, let's face it. That internationally and around Africa, we'll see the country in a new light. And you won't get that unless people are actually willing to embrace the media and not always just expect that everything will be positive in what they say.
Would you have any advice for local Zambian journalists in terms of, let's say there's a scenario where they're perhaps afraid to ask difficult or probing questions and they want to hold back, but they really want to know about a certain issue. What advice would you give to those journalists if there is something that they want to find out?
Yeah, it's difficult to give advice coming from South Africa, but I think the way we work is that you ask the questions. I'm not talking about live television, I'm talking about going to interview people in government and elsewhere. Ask the questions, edit later. So that's my first advice. And I think you'll be surprised, because what I've found through the years, and I worked for the national broadcaster in South Africa, is there's also a sort of an aura about government, about officials, that you can't ask them that. You don't ask that question. And the aura is sometimes actually put out there by the entourage that follow these people, not by the ministers or those officials themselves. So just be brave enough to ask those questions in a way that is, not aggressive. It's in an exchange, and try and put out that interviewing is an exchange of views, and they're not always perfect answers, but get them into that dialogue.
Okay, excellent. Do you feel that if questions to officials are approached in that kind of way, do you feel that the media has a role to play in democracy?
I think it's got a huge role to play. Absolutely. I think it is what democracy is all about. And I just think it's encouraging that countries like Zambia are just opening those doors, because I think we can only go from strength to strength, especially when it comes to investment in the country. That's what people want to see. They want to see open dialogue. They want to see the ministers standing up for what they're doing in the country, not hiding behind no comment. And I think around the world, just that expression, no comment, is becoming less and less acceptable.
Okay. Now, often people will say it's all well and good allowing and giving this press freedom, but with press freedom also comes a responsibility, and with that responsibility, the media has to be of a certain standard. So, I mean, you've been in the game for decades now in South Africa. Have you seen media standards improve in South Africa? And with those standards improving, do you feel that it's allowed for greater press freedom?
I think what's really changed is that the media, when I started out with Carte Blanche a quarter of a century ago, it was still a very surface industry in terms of print, radio and television. I think that it's got a lot deeper. I think we probe a lot deeper. We ask much more meaningful questions, and I think we aren't overpowered by situations. We still feel that even if we are interviewing the President, the Prime Minister, we can still ask those questions. So I think in that respect, it's got more integrity. And of course, the other thing that's happening in the media is the sophistication of equipment. I mean, we've got secret cameras, we've got devices to tape conversations. So there's an accountability that we can bring forward. There's a proof that we can give to our lawyers, that we can tackle subjects that maybe 10, 15 years ago, we wouldn't have the proof, and maybe our lawyers would say, but how can you say that? So I think that is one of the big elements in reporting these days, is substantiating the facts. And we can do that, of course, to a large extent with technology.
Okay. Apart from technology, is there any initiative that you felt that has really had a great role to play in improving media standards in South Africa?
I think probably competition. Competition is huge. When we started out, Carte Blanche was, in all modesty, the investigative television program. But of course, over the years, many programs have evolved. Some even on the side of the national broadcaster that have challenged us, that there's a bit of competition to get the stories. And as long as that's handled with integrity and with responsibility, that is only a good thing.
Derek Watts, thank you. My name's Ray Wilbern, and you've been watching the Partners Guide magazine show. Remember, Partners Guide means business in Zambia. Please stay tuned next week to our debate, which will be how can we improve press freedom and media standards in Zambia. If you'd like to comment on this issue, please visit our website www.pgzambia.com and follow the polls for the same topic. Likewise, you can follow this debate on our Facebook page, Partners Guide Magazine, and you can also follow us on Twitter @Pgzambia. You've been watching the Partners Guide magazine show. Thank you and goodbye.